Hi everyone, today we're going to dive into interactive animated prototyping in Figma, and we're going to create this delightful animated interaction that you can see on your screen. The focus here is to understand how this whole interaction works, how to set this up in prototype mode, and not really on how to create these individual visual elements. That being said, if you want to download the source file, this very specific source file with all these elements, make sure to check the link in the description. We're also going to go over some limitations, what you can and cannot do with this. But now let's just dive in, let's just figure this out together and see how we can make this work. So let's get started. Let's just go over the stuff that we already have. We have the file component, which is a component with two states. One state, as you can see, is just a default state when you are not doing anything with the file, and the second one is when you when you select this file with your mouse. And then we have the second component. We have the drop here area where you can, which is basically the element where you drop your files or pretend to drop your files. After all, we are dealing with prototypes only. And then we have an instance of this component that has 4 variants, by the way, here on this test frame, and then that's basically what we are working with. So I just created this beforehand so that we can really focus on the interactive aspect of this. To get started, we are going to do one thing, and that's using the file component on our canvas, on our frame. So I'm just going to go to Assets, and under Design 2, which is the page I'm currently on, I'm going to drag and drop, isn't that ironic, this component instance onto our frame, and then that's basically our starting point. So there is no interaction yet, set up yet. So if we now go to the prototype, if we now take a look at what we have basically 2 elements on our frame. So we have the file, surprisingly, and we also have this area. So what we basically want to prototype is when you click and then drag this element right here. First of all, it highlights as shown in this second state, and second of all, it actually moves over to this area. But then additionally, we want this area to highlight when you hover over the area with your mouse. We want to essentially, if I duplicate this is essentially what we want to be able to achieve. So purely by dragging this element, we want to basically make this happen, right? So we want to go from this to this, while at the same time making sure that this happens, right? This transition between these 2 elements happens only when we hover over that with our mouse. And as you can see, this is quite complicated, right? So you have basically one interaction, and inside of this interaction you have another. What I'm saying is that we basically have, or 3-in-1 even. So we basically have an interaction where you drag, right? Where you drag the file, when you change the position of the file. Then you have an interaction where when you hover over this element with your mouse, it changes states, right? It goes from here to here. And then additionally, you also have the change where you actually click on this file and the file changes states, right? From the non-highlighted to the highlighted one. So that's basically 3-in-1, right? So that's quite complicated. And honestly, I have no idea if this is going to work even, right? So we're just going to have to work our way through this and figure out what's possible and what is not. So so first of all, I think here's the first interaction we definitely should focus on. So when you actually select this file, so what does that mean, select this file? I think that means when you hover your mouse over this file and then you click it and hold it pressed down. And Figma has an interaction specifically for that. So let me just select the first component variant, which is, right, this is an instance of the file component, right? And I'm going to go to prototype, and then I'm going to connect the first state to the second state, right? Like this. And I'm going to define that while pressing, right, under interaction details, while pressing, which corresponds to the interaction that we want, change to property 1 variant 2, right? And this is going to be instant. This is going to be an instant transition. And what should happen now is that when I open the prototype again, to make sure, I'm just going to reset this. When I hover my mouse over this file and then I press it and hold it pressed down, it highlights, right? So that's the first step, right? We made this work. When I release my mouse, it de-highlights basically, right? So I can do this. So we have this interaction, as you can see and hear me clicking my mouse. we have this interaction where you can do this. So that's one part of the overall 3-in-1 interaction that we're going for here. Now, we also have to do this interaction where you move this file. So we want to, we're just gonna set both of these to default. When you drag this file, right, I'm gonna go to prototype, select this file on the first frame. When you drag this file, you wanna go to the second frame, basically. I'm gonna connect the first instance of this file and connect that to the second frame, and the whole frame, right? Not individual stuff. I don't even think you can do that, but we're connecting that to the overall frame. And we want to do one thing. We want to go on drag, right? Navigate to test frame, and we're going to go for smart animate ease out 300 millisecond, the default setting. So what should happen now? We should be able to not only click and highlight, but also click and drag. So let's click and hold it pressed down and then drag. Right? So this is possible, right? But there is one problem that we have encountered, and as you can see, that's the fact that when we highlight this component and then we drag it, it reverts back to its initial state. But that's something we don't want to do, right? We want to keep this highlighted. So how do we achieve that? Well, we could, in the second frame, right, we could do, instead of default, we could change that to variant 2, which is going to ensure that it's highlighted right here. So that means that when we, let me again do this. So click and drag, hold it pressed down, and then move it. We are getting closer, but still, as you can see, there is a problem, right? We have to sort this out. So we actually are able to highlight this, then we are able to drag it into a state where it's still highlighted, but in between something happens that we don't want, right? So it becomes unhighlighted again, and then gradually, as we drag this file, it's becoming highlighted again. But this is not useful to us. We have to think of a workaround how to keep this highlighted for the whole length of the interaction, right? So, you know, this is the challenging aspect of this interaction that I was mentioning previously. We have multiple nested, interconnected interactions, and we have to think about how to solve this. So this might mean that we maybe want to remove this interaction from the component level, right? So maybe we want to keep this interaction tied to this area and not this area, is what I'm trying to say. So let me just remove this while pressing interaction, and we're gonna have to add another in between state. So essentially what we're trying to do here is I'm gonna remove this interaction, move this second frame all over here, then duplicate the first frame, right? So that we get this. I'm just gonna space them out, and we're gonna have to sequence this interaction. So first of all, when we just start out, right, we want to go to prototype and set up this interaction where if you actually hold this file pressed down, right, so I'm again selecting the instance of this component on the first frame. This is going to be while pressing, right? So while pressing, we go to this frame, and then in this frame the file is going to be highlighted, right? So theoretically what we should be able to do now is, first of all, let me check the type of interaction we have. We want to have instant, right? That's nice, but we want to be able to go back and forth. So let's test this out. While pressing, back and forth, right? So we have the ability to go back and forth. That's great. So this is sorted out. Now we have to select the second instance of this component, and we have to connect that to the third frame where it is moved towards the right. So we're gonna go for on drag. And what I think should happen now is that we should get the behavior that we need. So let's try that. So interaction details, on drag, navigate to test frame. All of these are named the same, so it's better to just visualize these with arrows. Let me go to the prototype and let's try this out. So I can toggle between selected and deselected files, and then I can also drag, right? So we are getting there. So as you can see, this is what I'm able to do. I'm able to highlight this file and then move it with maintaining the highlighted state the whole time. So we are getting pretty close to the desired interaction, right? So, but can you spot the problem? The problem is that when I make up my mind and go back, it stays highlighted, and I don't think we want to do that. Or do we? So maybe we want to do this. Maybe we want to set up an interaction where on the second frame, we want to connect this file to the first frame, and we want to say that on mouse up, you're going to go back to the first state. So let's try that. Select, drag, make up my mind, release, make up my mind, and then release. But even though when I release, I have to click again and then go mouse up, because Figma basically thinks that you're not fully in this state, and that's why this transition is not triggered. So we want to do something, I don't know, probably like mouse leave. Let's try mouse leave. Is that gonna help? And move it, go back, and then release and mouse leave. So that's mouse leave, navigate to the first frame. I'm just gonna rename these frames to be 1, 2, and 3 so that it's not as confusing. And let's continue. Let's continue because we are getting closer, right? So now the current state of this interaction is that when I drag this all the way over here, this area highlights and says yes all the way over here, but I want to trigger this only if we actually hover with our mouse over this area. So we could do this thing where this would be deactivated, right? This would be just default. And then what we want to do is move this file on top of this area, right? So we're gonna move this file on top of this area, probably somewhere around here. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Somewhere over this area. And then what we want to do is go to this component. That's why I created this as a component, so that we can have separate interactions. And then I'm gonna go to prototype and then connect the first state to the second state, and again say mouse enter. So let's just try if that works, nested over the track interaction. So let's try that. I'm dragging the file. And as you can see, what happens is when I drag it over the area and then I release, it only triggers when I actually release my mouse and not during the dragging process, right? So Figma doesn't realize that right now I'm hovering over this area. So that's another limitation of this, right? So even though, as you can see, as we keep creating this prototype, we run into limitations of Figma, right? So this is one of them. This mouse enter interaction is gonna work only if we finish the drag interaction first. I mean, it's not a big problem. I think it looks quite nice, but still it's not 100% what we need. But I think this is something that we can, we can deal with. I think we can move on to the next phase and we can try and finish this. So what could happen then is that when you go to this state, I actually think we can now remove this interaction, right? So I'm going to remove this interaction, the mouse enter interaction, because we can define it on our own right here. I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to select the whole frame, connect the frame to the last frame or the fourth frame, and I'm going to do after a delay. And this delay is going to be what? It's going to be like 1 millisecond. It's not even, it's instant. It's basically instant, right? And in this fourth frame, I'm going to remove the file, right? And then additionally, I'm going to change this area to variant 3, which says just uploading, right? And now let's go back to the prototype and test what we have. I can select the file, I can drag it all the way over this area, release it, it says uploading, and now we are at uploading, right? And now here's the thing. I think to finish this interaction, we could continue on this level, because as you can see, I wasn't able to make this work where if you actually are in the middle of the track interaction, that this highlights. We weren't able to do that. What I think we could do now is create another state, right? So I'm gonna, another state of this area, I'm gonna click plus so that we get 2 uploading states, right? And we're gonna name our state. So this is gonna be default. This is gonna be highlighted, parentheses probably not going to be used. Then we get uploading, then uploading to, and then we get success. So we get 5 states. And what I think could be really, really cool is that if we added a loading bar, right? So a upload bar. So let me create a frame. Let me use an F tool, a frame tool. And then let me create a frame that's approximately 320 by 20. Let me fully round this and make it gray, right? So this is what we get. Now let me place that inside of this frame. I'm gonna make sure the auto layout is, goes vertically. And then I am going to probably decrease the size of this to make it like, I don't know, 10, 8 seems more natural. And I'm gonna move it below the uploading headline, right? I'm gonna also make it smaller probably. And then I'm going to just take this bar, rename this to loading bar, and I am going to duplicate this frame, right? So I have 2 loading bars, and I'm going to rename the second one to inner. And this inner frame is going to be nested inside of this frame. So I'm going to select this loading bar inner, Command X, select the loading bar, Command V, or that's actually not working, so I have to drag and drop that inside of the frame like this. So now I have a loading bar frame that contains loading bar inner frame. I'm gonna align this vertically and I'm gonna set this to blue. So I'm gonna use this blue, right? So what's happening right now? I have a loading bar element within which you get a loading bar inner frame, and then I can move that, right? So this is gonna be our loading bar. I'm gonna move this loading bar inner all the way to the left, so it's basically outside or just barely inside like this, right? So that's our starting point. Then I'm gonna probably make this frame lighter. I think that could be lighter, like this, okay? And I'm gonna then just take this whole thing, this loading bar, copy, select this auto layout, uploading to, and paste. Or actually, hold on, I have to paste that inside of this inner frame, right? So paste, so that it's within these boundaries. And then I'm gonna also change the direction of this so that I basically get 2 identical things, right? I could have just duplicated this, I'm realizing right now, but it is what it is right now. So let's just continue. I'm gonna select the inner frame and then I'm just gonna press Option H, which is gonna center this loading bar, which also means filling up the whole parent element, right? And now here is the cool thing. I'm gonna also make this headline probably blue. So we get this situation going on here where you have a gray headline and starting progress bar at the beginning, and then at the end you get this. So what I want to do now is basically connect this state to this state and go after delay, and this delay could be quite long, like 400 milliseconds. Change to property 1, uploading to, right? So that's this state, and we're gonna go for smart animate. And this smart animate is gonna be ease out, and this is gonna take quite a few seconds. So let's go for like, I don't know, 3000 milliseconds, that's 3 seconds. And then when we actually get to this state, when we fully transition into this state, we connect this state to the last one, to the success one, and then we go again after delay, right? So after delay, and that could be also like 300 milliseconds, change to property 1 success, and this is gonna be instant. Okay, this is going to be instant. So let's recap. This is quite complicated. Let's just recap. So what happens here is that after we get to this state and release our mouse, after a certain number of milliseconds, which is 1 millisecond, which means instantly, we go to the 4th frame. And on the 4th frame, we have this area with this state, okay? And that's all we need in terms of frames. Then all of the stuff that happens after this is gonna happen on this level, right? So from this state, this component is then gonna go from this state gradually to this state, right? Within this frame, we're not gonna be moving away from this frame. And then on its own, again, it changes to success. Okay, so that's where we are going to end up. So let me just change that back to uploading 1, and let's just see if we actually were able to make this work. So reset, and let's go for it. So I'm gonna click and drag all the way over this area, release, uploading, and success. We have the file is uploaded. Right? So we managed to make this work. As you can see, we have encountered some limitations. For example, we could not make the hover state with this area. At least it would probably be possible with like more time, but within the boundaries of this tutorial. I think this is what we're just gonna end up with. But I think the final result is quite nice. I mean, take a look. I mean, if you drag it over, you get basically this interaction where you can drag it over this area, and then you release it and you get this beautiful, delightful animation with the confirmation that the file transfer has been successful. So let's also consider what are the limitations, right? So the limitations of this are, with the drag interaction in Figma, you don't get the option to make up your mind in terms of specific path that you take over the area of your screen, right? So for example, imagine that I would want to take this file, you know, for a trip, and I want to go like all the way around this and then drop it right here. That's just not possible. So when you define a drag interaction, Figma is just going to take the shortest possible route, and you can't really change the direction of the file, right? As you can see, it's just this line. So that's another limitation of Figma. For the purpose of prototyping, for showing this to your stakeholders, to your clients, I think they will be very impressed still. So what I also like about this specific prototype is the fact that this mimics the Mac OS file appearance, essentially. So this is it. This is what we get. The cool thing is that now when we are actually done with this interaction, you can then change anything you need, right? So for example, if you want your highlight to be, instead of blue, you want this to be like green, like this, right? Green. And then you want to change the design of, I don't know, let's say make this headline bigger. All of that, that's possible. Because we have chosen this component-based approach where you just change the states of individual components, right? So I think I'm gonna change this back to the blue color and keep it there, but at the same time I think we're gonna go for a bigger headline on the successful state. So yeah, this is it. If you want to download the source file for this, if you want to download this, what we have created right here, including this little design of the file icon, make sure to check the link in the description. That will take you to my store. Thanks for tuning in. Leave a like if this video helped you, if you found it useful, and I will see you in the next one.